Hey, I'm Hashem, you're watching Pushing Film. Welcome back to the channel. Let's have a chat about printing. I'm always trying to encourage others and myself to print more. And it's hard when we live so much in our devices these days. And then in turn, a lot of our images end up living and dying on our devices. I get pretty lazy and go long periods without printing any of my work. And the other thing is that it can be quite expensive and time consuming. But then I always tell myself and others that it's worth it. Over this last year, I've started using a new inkjet printer, I've visited a new darkroom, introduced my exposure to print series, and have resumed work on a black and white street photography series that I plan to make into a photo book. So I figured this video could be a good reminder for any of you watching and a way to keep myself on track with all this sort of stuff. I'll also share a few recent pickups in terms of books and zines from other artists. And you might have noticed it's been a while since I've done an update on recent book and zine pickups because, to be honest, I've already filled up my bookshelf with a lot of what I had originally wanted. And I was also in the process of moving and having most of my stuff in storage for many months. So it didn't make sense to keep buying books. So for that reason, the few pickups I'll be sharing are mostly from last year before I moved, or maybe even older. But anyway, let's start with my series that I've been working on, some of the next steps I've taken to do with that. By the way, this is what happens when you leave your negative sleeving or labeling for too long. But yeah, on my black and white photo series that you may have heard me mention in some previous videos, I've been kind of sitting on this for a while and going back and forth on what to do with it, whether to make a little zine out of the series or a hardcover book. And I've now decided I want to definitely try and go with a hardcover book, even though it's not going to be an overly large one. It might have between 50 and 80 images in it. I want to try and go with something a little bit more substantial than the last print, at least when it comes to books or zines, which was the sun-dried strip. This one will be a little bit more substantial. So I finally gotten to the stage where I've culled down from what was probably about almost 1,000 images of street photography I've shot over the last 6+ years. Down to about 99, about 100 images, and then gone ahead and printed 6x4 proof prints of all of those images, which I'll then use to further edit down to the final selection, which will be about, like I said, somewhere between 50, 75, 80 images. I'm not sure yet, but then a lot of that will depend on the sequencing. So that's another thing I do with these 6x4s is I can lay them all out and start to get an idea of how they might look in sequence, in pairings, for example, on different pages, and then what works as a whole and what images might not work. Because although you can do this digitally, and I have sort of played around with that digitally, having it right there in person in terms of physical prints just makes the job a lot easier to quickly swap something in and out and see how it might work on a page spread, for example, or as a pairing on a single page. And yeah, it's something I've described as part of my process, even with the sun-dried strip zine. If you watched the video on that years ago, I did the same thing, 6x4 prints, which I then translate into Lightroom or InDesign or whatever it is for the final book design. So if you want some tips on getting these sort of prints, what I do, I didn't print these myself. I just go to Harvey Norman. So here in Australia, we have a place called Harvey Norman, but whether you use someone like them or Big W or Kmart or any of those cheap photo printing facilities, this doesn't need to be high quality. This is just proof prints that you're using for the purpose of selection and editing. So the reason I go to Harvey Norman, though, if you're also in Australia, is that a lot of them still maintain their old Fuji wet lab printers. And there's just a certain quality to getting wet lab prints. Also a bit of a funny smell, but I like the smell. It's probably a bad thing. That isn't quite the same with digital Fujifilm printers that a lot of even Harvey Normans have upgraded to, or if you go to a Big W or Officeworks, for example, especially Officeworks, I found that the new printers they use are pretty bad in comparison to the old Fujifilm ones. So yeah, just a nice little tip there. If you're also in Australia, these things cost 15 cents per print at Harvey Norman. So that's what I do for the 6x4 prints. Anyway, the next stages, like I said, is culling this down to a final selection and then doing a bit of a sequence physically, which I'll then translate into software. And then the next steps is finding the printer, choosing the cover materials, the title. I have a working title, and then the cost and funding, whether I do pre-orders or not. I do want to organize an exhibition for the launch and yeah, there's a lot to cover when it comes to printing a book because there's more to consider, there's more cost involved. And since 2020 or whenever it was that I last printed a zine, costs have gone up with paper materials, especially. So, yeah, I can't really give a release date on it for that reason. And I don't want to lock myself down into anything and rush it because I know there are obstacles involved with these sort of things. But yeah, those are the next steps. And I've started looking into some local printers because I would like to try and print it locally if possible. And then I can easily look into the options and papers that way without having to do too much back and forth with mailing samples and such. When it comes to the type of printing, I think I will go with a digital print option rather than offset printing because I won't be doing a massive enough run to justify the cost of offset printing. Usually you want to be doing 500 or 1,000 copies for offset printing, at least if you want to break even or not lose money on the project. But digital printing with a lot of the newer HP printers and such has gotten pretty good to the point where I think I could get a good product out of going with digital printing for this book. But yeah, a lot of differences between printing an actual book and a zine, something I'm learning about as I go along, and that I'll be happy to share here on the channel if you're interested. So if you have any questions about the process, you'd like to see more videos about this project coming to life, let me know in the comments. So aside from working on that series, on these black and white prints for editing the book series, I have been making some general photo prints, and some of which are from my recent trip to Broken Hill that you might have watched on the channel where I did a road trip up there. And I have some prints that I've done from this one, for example, which I mentioned was one of my favorite shots from that trip. This one was taken on Kodak Gold 200, and I printed it on this Ilford Gallery gold fiber rag paper, which is actually a gloss photo rag paper, but it doesn't have very much of a gloss at all. So this actually replicates the look of an old darkroom print with the paper properties that it has. So yeah, if you can see it on camera, I'll get a second angle and maybe even take some B-roll of this. It came out amazing. This paper is beautiful. I mentioned some of these gold fiber papers in my last episode of Exposure to Print. And yeah, I'm really pleased with the way this print came out. Developed it myself, scanned it myself, and couldn't be happier with the results from the combination of things that came together for some of these photos. I did also make a print to send to my friend M up there, just as a gift to send up that I'm going to hopefully pack up and post up there soon. And a couple of other prints that I probably have on the way. I'm trying to experiment a little bit more with some of these papers and the inkjet printing process. I am hopefully going to also try and do some darkroom prints from that trip with the black and white photos that I took. And I'm just waiting for an opportunity to set the bathroom up for some darkroom printing or take the negatives to a darkroom. And speaking of that, I mentioned it in the intro, but I also visited a new darkroom here in Melbourne, just tried it out for one session. It's a place called Brunswick Darkroom. I think they opened only just this year or maybe last year, but it's a really cool space. First time I'd visited there. I dropped in there and just made a few prints from the roll of Kentmere 200 that I had initially shot for my review on when that film came out. And yeah, it's a really cool space. The most interesting thing about it is they have an original revolving door so that you can come in and out of the darkroom space without, lights having to come on or off. You can just easily enter and exit whenever you like. And that's a really cool feature that I remember seeing in the dip and dunk process when I worked at Michael's Camera. But overall, yeah, just really nice staff. I went and did the introductory workshop sort of thing. They had a deal going on. My friend Heather was there, and I just took a bit of B-roll to show you here on camera, and it's somewhere I'm hopefully looking to go back to soon. It's just really nice to have these public facilities. We're pretty spoiled here in Melbourne to have more than one darkroom, and there are some others that I want to visit soon as well. One of which is called District Darkroom in Coburg. The owner has reached out to me for a while now. I just haven't had a chance to go up there, but yeah, I'm always looking to check out some of these public darkroom spaces, maybe open up a little bit more possibility than what I can do at home. Print, for example, printing bigger than 8x10 or doing color enlargements and so on. And if anyone watching hasn't ever done darkroom printing, as I've said before, I highly encourage you to give it a try. And if you don't have access to the equipment yourself, check out one of these public darkrooms like Brunswick Darkroom or District or Echo. If you're in Melbourne, there's plenty of options, or look up what is available to you in your local city. It's really worth trying it out if you've never done it before. And speaking of Heather, who was there at the darkroom, I also helped her with some inkjet prints for an exhibition she was doing around that time. This was a few months ago now, but she was entering a couple of photos into a small group exhibition here in Melbourne at a little bar in Northcote. And I did the prints for her on my inkjet printing. Although they were black and white, they were fairly large. They were A3 prints going into A2 frames. So we printed them full bleed on Ilford paper as well, not on this gold fiber rag, but on a different paper that had a little bit more punch and worked really well for these artistic fine art images that she had shot and entered into that exhibition. And it was a good learning experience for me, again, having started using this new Canon Pro 300 after only having used my Epson XP 15000, which I still have, but there's a little bit of a difference between these two printers, and the way black and white comes out is especially superior on the Canon Pro 300, which is a pigment-based printer. With my old Epson, that was a dye-based ink, so I would consistently get these color casts, whether they were green or magenta, on my black and white prints. So being able to do inkjet prints that have a great rendition of blacks and just tonality overall is opening up a lot of doors in terms of printing inkjet, and especially with some of these great papers that I've been talking about from Ilford with the Gallery series. Speaking of that, you probably know that Ilford has sponsored a few of these videos, which I'm really grateful for. Not this one, but with my Exposure to Print series, for example. And what that has opened up for me is the opportunity not only to get some of these papers and share them with you, but to learn more about the process and to experiment with different media types, whether it's like the cotton rags and the lusters and the gloss and in between, and all these factors that come into what affects the final print. What is the importance of ICC profiling or print prepping and sharpening and all these kind of things. So even though I've been lucky enough to have their sponsorship on a few of the past videos and hopefully some future ones, it's not just about this one brand. It's all about just learning about the process, whichever paper you use. Even back when I worked at Michael's before ever having these videos or the sponsorship, I was a big fan of the Ilford Gallery series. I would recommend it to customers, but I also enjoy plenty of other papers and brands, whether it's Hahnemuller or Canson. I've printed on all of these brands, and we're just lucky to have a great selection of options out there. So whatever you're printing on, as long as you're printing and enjoying the process, that's what matters the most. So I will do more content on printing. I am planning to do some Instagram reels as well with some quick tips about inkjet printing. So if there's any particular questions that you commonly come up with, or struggles, difficulties when it comes to printing your photos on inkjet printer, let me know and I could look into factoring that into some of these reels or quick tips videos that I might have coming up, whether it's reels or here on the YouTube channel. But yeah, now that that's over with, let's go through some the most recent photo and book pickups that I've made. So starting with the last photo book that I bought, I probably mentioned this on a live stream, but never in a video. It was a copy of Nicaragua by Susan Meiselas. So this is a book containing street photography during the late 70s in Nicaragua, during the revolution that happened. There was an insurrection. I think it was called the Sandinista Revolution, concluded somewhere around the late 70s into early 80s. And she documented this as it was happening in Nicaragua, and just resulted in this great selection of images that you'll see in this book that someone actually recommended to me during another video or live stream. And it sat on my watch list for a couple of years at least, until I finally saw a good deal come up on, I think it was Booktopia, one of the local bookstores that you see here, or the Nile or something like that, as part of the Angus and Robertson chain. And anyway, yeah, I finally got a copy, highly enjoyed it, can really recommend it. If you're a documentary photography fan, you will definitely enjoy this book, especially if you like color documentary photography. But yeah, I don't want to spoil too much of it. I would just say that if you can find a copy of this for a decent price, pick it up, check it out. It's a great one. When it comes to zines, there are a few, one of which I purchased and two of which were gifted to me. The one I purchased, which is actually last year, it's quite a while ago now, it was a copy of On the Same Boat by my friend Alex Munoz, who's in Japan, living in Japan, and his friend Yusuke Nagata, who I've also admired for a while and have bought one of his prior zines, which was this Memory Colors one from New York. But this is a zine they worked on together with a theme of smokers in Japan. And it's just really interesting, like exploring this space of people smoking cigarettes in different parts of Japan and the little subculture behind it and implications of that explored through imagery. Just a nice little fun zine to go through if you are interested in that. I'm not sure if they still have copies, but I just thought it was worth highlighting as one that I enjoyed. Now, a couple of zines that were given to me, one of which was by my friend M. Jensen when I was up in Broken Hill, was a copy of her From Away zine. I spoke about this in that video in the interview that I did with her, which is also up on the channel. Go check those out if you want more information on this photo series. It was a great little series that she exhibited in the gallery up there in Broken Hill. But yeah, there's videos where I covered that, and it was a nice little gift from her to have a physical copy of it. Another one that was given to me was by Yamin, a photographer based in, I think he's in San Francisco, or at least he was at one point, but someone I've been following online for a while, never met in person, but he's always been super kind in the YouTube comments or messages that he sent me, and I've enjoyed his photography. And he had sent me a zine before, which is one of his previous ones called Kuya, and he reached out and wanted to send me his latest one, which is called You Had to Be There. This one, compared to his previous one, is more portrait focused, and it just has these amazing characters, I would call them, or situations around characters that he's documented over a period of time. And given the nature of these bizarre and really interesting characters and environmental portraits, the title was quite fitting in that You Had to Be There. Just kind of gives the sense that there's a bit of a mystery behind these where you would have had to have been there to understood what was going on. But yeah, I can highly recommend that. He just released this zine, which is really nice quality also. I'd like to say it's almost more of a book than a zine. And again, there's a bit of a gray zone there when it comes to what would you consider a book versus a zine. And this one strikes a nice balance, I think. So I'd highly recommend checking out his work if you're not familiar. But yeah, that's all the recent pickups I've had. There are a couple of others that I could mention, like Trent Park's Monument and a copy of Sergio Lorene's self-titled book, which is the Aperture one. But maybe I'll save those for their own videos. They both deserve it. And currently I'm working on my next episode of Exposure to Print, which will be episode 3. Let me know, again, if there's anything you would like to see in that or in relation to printing, tips, tutorials, creative stuff for the Instagram Reels, whether it's Inkjet or Darkroom. And just let me know what your biggest questions are when it comes to printing, and feel free to share anything else in the comments. Thanks for watching this one, and I'll see you next time.